The first Pennywise. It, from 1990, introduced us to the very first Pennywise, the clown who would go on to become one of the most iconic horror characters of all time. The story takes place in the small town of Derry, a place that seems ordinary at first glance but has been hiding mysterious disappearances for generations. Everything begins when several children start vanishing, leading a group of 7 friends known as the Losers Club to discover that something far darker is behind these events.
Kill you all! I'll drive you crazy, and I'll kill you all on every nightmare you ever had. I am your worst dream come true.
The man most responsible for turning Pennywise into an icon was Tim Curry. Interestingly, Curry managed to create a terrifying version of the character without relying on advanced special effects or constant transformations. He had bright red hair, white makeup, colorful clothes, and a smile that could easily belong at a children's birthday party. And maybe that's exactly what makes this version so memorable. Throughout the story, Pennywise usually appears whenever children are alone or emotionally vulnerable. He speaks in a friendly way, jokes around, and slowly earns his victims' trust before revealing his true nature. But Pennywise isn't just a killer clown. He's a far older and more powerful entity that chooses this appearance because it knows clowns attract children. In reality, he's a being capable of taking many different forms, usually based on each person's greatest fears. To one character, he may appear as a classic movie monster. To another, he may become someone who has already died. It all depends on what will terrify them the most. The miniseries also introduces one of the franchise's most important concepts, the 27-year cycle. The creature awakens periodically to feed on fear before disappearing once again. This detail explains why the story unfolds across 2 different time periods. First, we follow the protagonists as children. Then, years later, they return to Derry as adults to face the evil they believed they had already defeated. Tim Curry almost didn't get the role. During casting, the producers seriously considered several other actors to play Pennywise. However, once Curry appeared in costume and began improvising some of his lines, it became obvious they had found the right man. Many of Pennywise's strange expressions, unsettling smiles, and sudden mood swings came directly from Curry's own performance. Another detail that helped make this version so legendary came from an unexpected limitation. Because the production was made for American network television, there were strict restrictions on graphic violence and gore. As a result, the filmmakers had to rely much more on atmosphere and suspense than shocking visuals, and it worked brilliantly. Instead of showing everything, the miniseries allowed the audience's imagination to fill in the most terrifying parts. More than 3 decades after its release, many fans still consider this the definitive version of Pennywise. The Indian Pennywise. You probably don't know this one, but there actually was an Indian adaptation inspired by IT in 1998. What's even more interesting is that this series isn't simply a copy of Stephen King's story. Instead, it takes the novel's core idea and completely adapts it to Indian culture and the style of television productions at the time. Called Woe, the story follows a group of 7 friends who battle an evil entity during childhood. Years later, as adults, they're forced to reunite when the evil returns. If that premise sounds familiar, it's because it closely follows the foundation created by Stephen King. But that's where most of the similarities end. The clown is played by Lilliput, already a well-known actor in India. His short stature helped create a unique visual presence for the character. His appearance features an extremely colorful wig, exaggerated white makeup, and facial expressions that immediately tell you something isn't right. One of the most interesting aspects of this version is its design. While the American Pennywise tried to look like a real clown to lure children, the clown in Woe has a much more theatrical appearance. Some episodes, he looks like he walked straight out of a children's TV show. In others, he feels like something straight out of a nightmare. Like the original, the creature uses fear as its primary weapon. It appears before vulnerable children, jokes with them, makes promises, and lures them into deadly traps. The balloons are still there, and several scenes feature elements reminiscent of IT. One of the moments fans remember most involves an attack at a swimming pool, showing that the series also tried to create suspense in everyday locations. But perhaps the biggest difference lies in the villain's origin. In Stephen King's story, Pennywise is a cosmic entity, an ancient being that exists far beyond human reality and merely adopts the appearance of a clown because it makes hunting children easier. In Woe, however, the writers chose a completely different direction. The series gives the villain a far more human and tragic backstory. Here, the villain was once Vikram, a man with dwarfism who spent his entire life being mocked because of his appearance. He falls in love with a woman who humiliates and rejects him. Heartbroken, he takes his own life and returns as a vengeful spirit. Another interesting difference is the scale of the production. While the 1990 American miniseries consists of only 2 long episodes, Woe ran for 52 episodes. That allowed the story to explore its characters, relationships, and supernatural events in much greater depth. At the same time, it also made the series feel more like a suspense soap opera than a traditional horror show. The new Pennywise. In it from 2017, Pennywise underwent a complete transformation. After nearly 3 decades in which Tim Curry's version dominated fans' imaginations, it was finally time to introduce a new incarnation of the creature. That's where Bill Skarsgård came in. Within the film's opening minutes, it's immediately clear that this Pennywise would be very different. The story still takes place in Derry, a small town where children have been mysteriously disappearing for decades. The film once again follows the Losers Club during the 1980s. When Bill's younger brother disappears, the friends begin investigating and discover that an ancient entity has been terrorizing the town for far longer than they ever imagined. But what truly stands out is the creature's appearance. The 2017 version looks wrong from the very first second. Everything about him feels unsettling. His clothes resemble old-fashioned garments, as though they came from another century. The fabric appears worn, the design feels unnatural, and nothing about him suggests he belongs in the modern world. That choice was completely intentional. The filmmakers wanted to reinforce the idea that Pennywise is far older than any living human being, and Bill Skarsgård contributed enormously to that effect. One of the most famous aspects of this version is Pennywise's unsettling eyes. The surprising part is that very little of it was created with CGI. The actor can actually move his eyes independently.
Where you going, Ed? If you lived here, you'd be home by now.
That ability made many scenes far more disturbing without relying on digital effects. Another major difference is his behavior. Tim Curry's Pennywise enjoyed talking, joking, and playing with his victims for extended periods. Skarsgård's version feels much more like a wild predator. At times he speaks with a childlike voice, yet there's always the sense that something is about to go horribly wrong. His movements are unpredictable, his voice constantly shifts, and his facial expressions swing between playful curiosity and overwhelming hunger. This approach makes Pennywise feel almost alien. Throughout the story, each member of the Losers Club is forced to confront their own deepest fears, and that's one of the creature's most fascinating abilities. Pennywise doesn't choose his forms randomly. He studies each victim and transforms into whatever will frighten them the most. The film uses this concept to create wildly different horror sequences. Rather than relying only on the clown itself, it turns each character's personal fears into unique monsters. It also helps reveal something important about the entity's true nature. As we know, Pennywise isn't actually a clown. Behind that disguise is an ancient cosmic being far older and more powerful than humanity itself. The film doesn't explore this mythology in great detail, but it leaves plenty of clues throughout the story. Another interesting fact involves the movie's special effects. Many people remember it as being filled with CGI, but that's not entirely true. Much of the work was achieved through practical makeup and costumes. Digital effects were used mainly to enhance impossible movements, transform creatures, and make certain moments feel even more unnatural. That's why so many sequences still hold up years after the film's release. And it was precisely that combination that helped turn the movie into a worldwide phenomenon. For years, replacing Tim Curry's iconic performance seemed impossible. But Bill Skarsgård accomplished something extremely rare. He created a completely different version of Pennywise without trying to imitate what came before. Instead of relying on dark humor and sarcasm, he transformed Pennywise into something far more animalistic, unpredictable, and supernatural. And that evolution would pave the way for an even more monstrous version of the entity in the sequel released 2 years later. The Final Showdown. In it, Chapter 2, the story picks up 27 years after the events of the first film. The Losers Club has gone their separate ways and has almost completely forgotten what happened in Derry. That's part of the creature's influence, as it seems to erase the memories of anyone who manages to leave the town. But when a new wave of disappearances begins, Mike Hanlon, the only member who stayed in Derry all those years, realizes the cycle has started again, and that can only mean one thing. Pennywise is back. Once again played by Bill Skarsgård, the clown retains his now iconic appearance, but this time he seems even more confident. After all, the losers have grown up, moved on with their lives, and carry emotional scars they've never fully healed. Instead of simply terrifying children, Pennywise now exploits the emotional wounds each of them has accumulated over the years. One of the most interesting changes in this version is exactly that approach. In the 2017 film, Pennywise was essentially a predator hunting for prey. Here it feels much more personal. There's a constant sense that he doesn't just want to feed. He wants to humiliate, break, and destroy the people who dared to stand against him as children.
I know your secret, your dirty little secret, your dirty little secret.
Throughout the film, he takes on several monstrous forms. One of the most memorable is Mrs. Kirsch, an apparently kind elderly woman who welcomes Beverly into her old childhood home. The scene begins awkwardly and gradually becomes more unsettling before revealing one of the most disturbing transformations in the entire franchise. Another unforgettable moment happens during the losers' reunion at a Chinese restaurant. The group reminisces about the past while sharing childhood memories. Everything seems relatively peaceful until their fortune cookies suddenly transform into bizarre creatures.
What the f is that, man?
Throughout the story, Pennywise continues using the same strategy that has always worked for him, manipulating emotions, guilt,
I hate you!
shame,
All those sit-ups, but deep down still just a little fatty loser.
regret, insecurity, and fear become tools to weaken his victims before the final confrontation. The monster even suggests that fear makes people taste better. It's a bizarre idea, but it helps explain why he spends so much time terrorizing his victims before actually attacking them. Visually, the sequel greatly expands the scale of the story. While the first film felt closer to a coming-of-age horror adventure, Chapter 2 fully embraces the cosmic side of Stephen King's mythology. Little by little, we learn that Pennywise is an ancient entity that arrived on Earth long before the town of Derry even existed. This expanded mythology also introduces the famous Ritual of Chud, an ancient attempt to defeat the creature. The losers believe the ritual may finally end the cycle of terror that returns every 27 years. However, things don't go exactly as planned, and they realize defeating Pennywise requires something far more important than any mysterious ritual. This is where the film introduces one of its biggest differences from the first chapter. For the first time, Pennywise shows genuine vulnerability. For decades, he seemed virtually unstoppable, a force of nature that couldn't be defeated. But now the losers discover that the creature's power depends entirely on the fear it inspires. The more terrified his victims become, the stronger he grows. The final battle pushes this idea to its limit. Pennywise transforms into a gigantic creature that combines features of both a clown and a spider.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Time to float!
Interestingly, this sequence relied more heavily on CGI than almost any other scene in the franchise, allowing the filmmakers to create something impossible to achieve with practical makeup alone. Even so, Bill Skarsgård continued performing many of the creature's physical movements himself during filming. His famous lazy eye effect, which unsettled so many viewers in the first movie, was once again performed naturally by the actor in numerous scenes.
27 years I dreamt of you. I craved you. Oh, I missed you.
In the end, the 2019 Pennywise represents the creature at its most powerful. He's still the same predator introduced in 2017, but now with greater powers, more elaborate transformations, and a far more personal connection to his victims.
Now I can play with the clown.
The origin of the clown. In it, Welcome to Derry, the franchise goes back in time to explore a period in Derry's history that had never been fully explored before. The series is set in 1962, exactly 27 years before the first film, following a group of children who begin realizing that something is terribly wrong in their town. Mysterious disappearances, strange behavior, and recurring tragedies draw the attention of the young protagonists, who soon discover that the evil haunting Derry has existed far longer than anyone imagined. Within this setting that we encounter a different version of Pennywise, once again portrayed by Bill Skarsgård. While the films often showed him taking pleasure in playing with his victims, here there's a feeling that we're seeing a more primitive and feral version of the creature. One of the series' most interesting aspects is its attempt to explain how the terrifying clown came to look the way he does. The story introduces the idea that Pennywise's iconic appearance was inspired by Bob Gray, a circus performer who crossed paths with the entity decades before the main events. According to the series, the creature stole the man's appearance and made it its primary hunting disguise. This adds an intriguing new layer to the character, suggesting that the clown's appearance wasn't chosen at random. It became his preferred form because it allowed him to approach children without immediately raising suspicion. Bill Skarsgård once again delivers one of the strongest performances in the series. The show also greatly expands the creature's abilities. Beyond the familiar illusions and transformations, Pennywise demonstrates an even greater capacity to manipulate entire groups of people. Instead of focusing solely on isolated individuals, he begins influencing the behavior of the town itself, exploiting conflicts that already exist among its residents. The horror doesn't come only from jump scares or the clown's appearances, it also comes from the way he encourages the darkest parts of human nature. Another defining characteristic is how Pennywise toys with his victims before attacking.
How do you see it? Stay back!
He continues using twisted humor, unsettling jokes, and absurd situations to confuse anyone who crosses his path. At times, his manifestations resemble distorted theatrical performances, as though he's putting on a private show designed specifically for each victim. The series also introduces several creative forms of attack, including manifestations tied to each character's personal fears and events that completely defy logic. As the story progresses, the protagonists begin uncovering evidence that the entity has existed for millions of years, and that its connection to Derry runs far deeper than than anyone ever suspected. Ancient local legends refer to the creature by other names, including Galoo, a figure passed down through generations of folklore. These discoveries help build a much richer mythology for the world of It, something that has always been present in Stephen King's novels, but rarely explored in such detail on screen. Another important element involves the discovery of possible weaknesses. The series suggests that materials connected to the meteor that brought the creature to Earth may possess properties capable of weakening or repelling it. This creates a new layer of mystery and gives the characters something tangible to investigate, instead of simply reacting to the monster's attacks. The production also appears to explore the creature's perception of time in a completely new way. Several moments suggest that Pennywise doesn't experience time the way humans do. Past, present, and future seem to exist simultaneously for him, helping explain his obsession with certain people and events. This concept makes the entity feel even more alien, reinforcing the idea that it operates far beyond the normal laws of reality. Welcome to Derry serves as an important companion piece to the franchise's mythology. Rather than simply repeating the formula of the films, the series explores how the legend of Pennywise was built over the decades, revealing new details about his origins, hunting methods, and influence over the town. The result is a more primitive, instinctive, and perhaps even more terrifying version of the creature, showing that long before he became the clown audiences know today, Pennywise was already an ancient evil lurking in the shadows of Derry.